Welcome to Conversations with Chuck Bennington. I'm Chuck Bennington, and I don't know it all, and I don't pretend to, but I do know that I love my son, and I want him to have a better, faster, smoother journey through the trials and tribulations of life than I had myself. So here's my documented journey, stories, lessons, and experiences that are really for you, buddy. I love you.
There it is.
There it is. And here we are for another episode with Conversations with Chuck. How are you on this fine day?
I'm good. I'm actually thinking about what our topic today will be that we have figured out 25 seconds ago, and we've been recording for like 20 seconds. So Lisa said, hey, why don't we talk today on kind of like thoughts and lessons in friendship? And I was like, I'm still really trying to figure a lot of that out myself. And I think that probably makes it more useful and more authentic to talk about. But the thing that got me thinking in that perspective in that short time is just how unprepared, at least I have often found myself as a parent, in knowing which conversations were coming at what times. And so, I think like exploring stuff that I don't really have figured out is probably like more in the nature of how it will often come about. And so probably going through these conversations in advance is the best answer.
Gives you some thinking. I mean, I was thinking on it over the weekend because I had more than 5 seconds to think about the topic. But that's the nature of our game. But the different seasons, I guess, when we talk about friendships and relationships and how that they can evolve over time, particularly ones you may have maintained. Some people are lucky to have maintained friends since they were kids and they're still, and it survived the different seasons of life. And whereas quite often you can see that, people fall away, reason, season, lifetime, all of that sort of stuff. But also like when we're kids, it's kind of that idea of like, Chuck's my best friend and that's it. I have one best friend. And then and no one else, I can't have no more room for that. And Chuck and I are going to be best friends forever. But then as adults, you have friends who, fit into different niches in your life. And it's just an interesting thing to think about is how do we be a good friend? Like, how do we, be a good friend to ourselves, I guess, on one level, but also, meet those needs of interacting with others and having that role in someone else's life.
So, where to begin?
I think, maybe the construct of friends, when you're young, friends are, people you hang out with. It's just, someone you play with or someone you see every day. It's all about the fun. But you spoke earlier in your journey about your group of friends all came from, broken homes or whatever, and you all kind of got having some of those harder conversations early and accepting some differences within each other.
Yeah, I think that, so what, maybe we overthink it and overcomplicate it as adults because we have a tendency to try to do that shit. What are friends? What is friendship? At least if we look at it in the season of childhood, it's just initially acquaintances with, multiple similarities, or like some similarity that's strong enough to build some type of social bond. Like, well, does that really ever change? Maybe like we just, we cast such a small net when we're kids. It's like, you like these three things? Holy shit, I like these three things. You're the only other person that I know that likes these three things. And that's enough to create like, the leaning in for a deeper social bonding experience. At least like that's an idea that I have at this point as we talk through it. And like I said, I don't know, I haven't really thought about this a lot. And that's interesting that I haven't thought about it a lot. So maybe that's something, because when we become adults, it's like, well, this is, man, how big is the net that you cast of people who are in CrossFit, who own businesses, who X, Y, and Z, and we could both probably throw some nets that would yield an enormous number of humans, but you're like, not as a default, my friends, at all in any way. And you're like, even though we have those commonalities and connection points, and so like, I don't know, is it just a question of proximity? And I would venture to say, like, formatively, yes. But then, like, that's probably erroneous and a fallacy, because I've got a lot of really great relationships that are completely remote. Yours is like an example of that. But then also how Vanessa and I began relative to how we ended up. So I guess proximity is probably not necessary, at least initially. Maybe it's just frequency of conversation, and then it has to, like, at some point transition to depth of conversation.
I think that evolution of the way that we communicate has allowed us to broaden with the internet, and it's able to make that net wider, even at a younger age, because you can just access people that you wouldn't normally be able to, wouldn't even know they existed, just because of social media and internet and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess, like, maybe to approach it more usefully is like, all right, Liam, like, everybody has friends to some degree, especially earlier on in life, and that can be harder as you get older. And so maybe, some useful frameworks, or at least things that I believe at this point in my life. I do believe having personal friendships is necessary to thrive as a human.
For sure.
In me speaking to myself, there is an unfortunate minimization of non-personal and professional relationships. I have very, very, very few relationships that exist in my life that do not have some other element of shared or mutual business or professional attachment. That's not to say that I don't have them, but, like, that is the overwhelming minority of my relationships. And that's something that I have been thinking about and have been struggling about. And I don't know that struggle is the right word. It's a thing I've been thinking about and contemplating, because one thing that is nice is that I do know a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and business owners. I do know a lot of people that, occupy these similar professional interests. And, like, man, what a great way to curate a group of friends where you have, like, these commonalities that also allow you to grow as a human. But it can keep you in potentially some ways, like, in a more closed exposure to, like, a more limited purview of, like, the world and situations and circumstance and context. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because you could become, like, a master of your domain. But a thing that I have been working on, and that I do generally, like, pretty well innately, is build relationships that I wouldn't consider friendships, but probably, like, closer, more known associates outside of, like, the world that I live in. And maybe that's, like, a weird fucking reflection, introspection, that, like, you could just be like friends, right? And I'm like, well, we should probably figure out, like, something through a context of, like, business or reciprocity or something. Maybe I like the idea of there being a more transactional piece of it. I don't know that, but that's just a thing I'm thinking about as I say it. So, like, fuck, I'm rambling. Friends are necessary. Cultivating friendships is not the cleanest, simplest thing, even though I feel like it should be. And so the caveat is, like, you shouldn't have to force a relationship to exist. That doesn't mean you don't have to do work in relationships, friendships, professional relationships, romantic relationships, or just, like, friendships overall. Like, you should do some work because you value the relationship, but being in the relationship in and of itself should not be where the effort is required. If you
absolutely
are forcing yourself to have to like be some kind of way that like you don't really want to be there. That's not it.
If you're resentful every time you're reaching out,
for you to entertain like the possibility, the opportunity, the space, the conversation, whatever, like that's bad news bears. Like friendship should have a feel to it, and that doesn't mean that you can't cultivate it, you can't grow it, you can't nurture it, but like fuck man, life is too short, and attention and bandwidth are too limited to fight to have people exist in your life that probably don't need to. And so I don't know that there's a lot useful in that besides.
Well, no, it is
fight.
It is useful because that's something I didn't recognize until much later in life, where when I was reflecting, it's like I'm the person always reaching out, I'm the one always doing the thing, and it was highlighted to me by a friend who said, "Oh, can you come see me? It's too far to go see you." And I'm like, the highway's the same distance in both directions. And I'm like, okay. And I would often fall in the trap of considering someone more of a friend to me than they would consider to them. So I would consider somebody, oh, we're really close friends, but they didn't have that same perspective or whatever on it. And you realize that you're the one doing the heavy lifting. You're like, oh, and as you're younger and if you're, it's more of a social thing, you're like, you don't pay any attention. But when you get older and your circle tends to get smaller, you tend to start to notice those things a little bit more, I think, and be more intentional about nurturing the friendships that matter, where there's that reciprocity. And it's just the feels like, that, it feels good to spend time with this person and talk to this person and share things. And you know that they're sharing, back with you, and it's mutual rather than just, oh, I've got to go hang out with Chuck today. It's
there needs to be like mutual engagement in the relationship that is predicated on some level of care for the other person. I think that would be, like a qualifier. Because if like I don't really care about you, well then like we can't really friendship and vice versa. I don't know. And like maybe it is to a degree low expectations. And not in a negative way or not in a bad way, but definitely there's a lot of, my own life experience where much younger I sought for friendship much greater, a seeking for inclusion, a seeking for belonging, a seeking to, expand my otherwise perceived tribe of one. And certainly haven't found that in adult life. And I don't know that that's a me thing or a more universal thing.
It's actually,
I know that like circumstance makes it generally more effortful to accumulate and nurture and curate a bunch of relationships, but maybe to my own detriment, I find myself seeking less relationships the further I go.
I think I was kind of the opposite then as a child, like, because I didn't have many relationships as in friendships, and I kind of, hung to myself. As an adult, I would kind of be seeking out that need to be included and be part of something. And we talked on one of my coaching calls about, in some way I used the box that was like my circle of friends. And it's like, well, no, dude, some of this is transactional and some of this is, your.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a hard line to figure out, is the intersection of personal and professional, and especially with, I mean, that is a hard line always and forever. At least that is my view of it at this juncture in my life and in like the story that I am writing and have had written to this fucking moment, that I don't know anybody that I can recall, in really thinking about it, I don't know anybody that has had just, very clean, clear-cut, easy intersection of personal and business. And
No.
again, that does not mean bad or negative, but
No.
differentiating, hey, what context are we speaking to this thing in this conversation, this viewpoint? Like, what type of interaction are we engaged in at the moment? I know that potentially somebody might argue that it should be the same. Like, if it's a good fit, if it's a good relationship, it should be the same, whether you're talking about personal or business. And like, that doesn't
always,
at least in my experience.
no.
I haven't found an experience where the personal and the professional are so completely in alignment that the conversation, the direction, the questions, the thought process would be, the same.
Yeah.
For Vanessa and I, like in business partnership, it's like, hey, are we talking about this in the context of the business and what's best for the business? Or are we talking about this in the context of like us personally, because those are not necessarily the same thing. And to keep in mind that like you would need to have that line of differentiation in any given conversation. Just fucking hard.
It is when
it can't be done really well, but like it's just like there's messiness to it because there can't not be, and that maybe that's a beautiful piece of life. And maybe it's part of like the non-binary, like, hey, dude, it's gray area. Like you find the people you fucking love and you guys figure out how to like play together and work together. And like, you can like, that's awesome. But at least know at this point, fucking Monday, September 19th at 2:52 PM, like there will be some pieces of it that are harder boundaries and lines to define. And I know that sounds super vague, and it's because it is.
It is. It's just, even in its practical sense, it is very, you can't, you see, like in life, like I have quite an eclectic, diverse group of people who I would consider friends and in my circle. And there's no formula for why I'm friends with one particular person over another, even though the situations and the likes and interests might be the same. It's just that, non-defined, non-specific, vague thing that's like, no, I'm going to be friends with you. Something just doesn't gel with you. So it's, you can't, there's no specifics and no hard and fast black and white rules about how do we form these. And then it's just about some value stuff, I guess, around how we elect to maintain and nurture it and either see them grow or naturally let them die.
That has been the thing that has made navigating relationships personally and professionally easier the further in life and the later I've gone, is the net can be so broad that you could have 100 highly similar interests and you're still looking at 10 million people all over the planet that you could potentially be in contact with in a matter of moments on text, video, like whatever. So similar interests are hard for figuring out, like, is this worthwhile? And so like shared value structure, are the same types of things important? And that ends up being a more useful framework to view things through, because at least my own experience, I found a lot of people where I share similar values and that alignment supersedes any other shared interest. That we are the types of people that see life in the world in a manner in which that is enough to bond similar viewpoints, frameworks, and belief structures around. The application, like the other interest, like the what's and the stuff, is less important.
And having those shared values means that you're adding, by having different perspective on the what's and the stuff, gives you, like, you're not just having the same experiences with the same people, like you're sharing the values, but they're also bringing other experiences that you aren't necessarily familiar with. So it's all learning and growing as well, and that's how the cycle should go. And
yeah, and I think, like, to give a little bit more context to that, because I know it sounds super vague, but like a lot of people initially assume that sales and a more transactional, monetizing things, transacting for services, is at odds with fitness. Like fitness professionals are often like, I don't want to like be salesy or engage in sales. And it's like, well, you're not seeing the shared value structure of like, you want to help people, right? And if that supersedes it, like, okay, so you guys both want to help people, we can agree on that. Do you understand that like part of what allows people to help themselves is the ability to make a transaction as an investment in their future identity? Do you understand that like allowing somebody to have a transaction creates a stronger belief structure and a higher level of evaluation of the thing itself, so they're more likely to use it and do it? If we can like find that middle ground of like, hey, you know, helping people is the thing that we both value the most highly, how can we get each other to see eye to eye and where these things really aligned? And I know that that's kind of a messy comparison, but I think it's relevant. I think it is helpful to figure out, you know, okay, how would we take a shared value and have two totally dissimilar views and figure out like bridging the gap?
And I guess that's a skill like that I think we can intentionally develop to a degree, but some of it is also, you know, just we subconsciously develop, because if we flick back to then being kids, it's very, very arbitrary. It's like, I like Chuck, he wears, you know,
we have the same shoes.
We have the same shoes. Or, you know, I don't like Mary because, you know, she has a green water bottle. Like, it can be something completely just as that. And maybe the kids don't understand and can't process exactly that same, you know, slicing that their brain's doing in that moment to decide if they align with somebody. But it comes down to nope, just, I don't know why I don't like Mary. She just annoys me. Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to like, you know, being able to thin slice something, and you know, your vibe can very much so be off. I do believe in that, but I think something I was thinking about as you were kind of speaking through that is, in a lot of ways, we do make it way too hard and complicated as adults, because there have been enough experiences that I've had, and I guess an easy one is on a flight. On a flight, I can become fast friends with somebody sitting next to me from a completely different walk of life, completely different like ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic class, just like all the things can be different, but we can find enough shared interests, probably based on similar values, because I believe that most people are genuinely good and most people want what's best for themselves and the people in contact in their lives, and would prefer that that happen not at the detriment of somebody else if possible. And so, yeah, maybe that's it, is you just find people you vibe with and you're like, we hang out. I don't know. Like, it feels good being around you, and like, fuck, we don't really actually have to have anything else in common. We can like develop and cultivate a friendship around just like feeling good in each other's presence.
And you know, those are the people that you find you'll drift in and out of each other's lives, and it's not a thing. It's not an issue. Like, we have those friendships and those people we just naturally are drawn to and vibe to, where it's like we catch up, it's great. Might not catch up for 6 months, 12 months, speak very little in between, but it's not the thing then when we catch up going, well, you didn't ring me, or you haven't checked in, or I didn't know this about you. It's just like we spoke yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just that it's very easy. It's just very, I feel like we just talked yesterday, and you go, oh yeah, it does. And there's no other stuff. It's just being present in that moment, and then we go about our lives.
Yeah, and I don't know how that gets created or coalesced, or if it can or should, or if it does. I don't know, because that is very much so the relationship that I have with the childhood friends that I still have contact and communication with today. And I've mentioned that on a couple episodes, like have a group text thread that was in this morning with a handful of dudes that I intersected with as early as elementary school, and then a couple more in middle school. One outlier that was a later life addition into the circle, but We do have some similar value structures in a general sense, but not in a hyper specific sense. Otherwise, we would have like probably done more similar things. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
No, I just think it's just an interesting. I guess for me, I've been reflecting on it, particularly in the last couple of years, as I've really been able to identify who's really in my circle and who's really not, based on the conversations we've had, and looking at those friendships, which I thought were built on a good foundation and were had that reciprocity and shared values and aligned. And it's like one thing changes in your life, and all of a sudden it's like poof, there's a chasm in that relationship, and you're like, wow, we're not actually anywhere near the same space that I thought we were in. And it's like, oh, and it's that evaluation assessment that now it became a more difficult conversation rather than just naturally nothing changes.
I think that I have had a pretty comfortable sense of that for most of my life. I don't think that's a thing that like I'd really struggled with a ton because I had the earlier move, the earlier move from Colorado, and then in Florida, my mom and I moved several times in a move in childhood. If you change schools, like
Yeah.
for the most part, at least back in my day, before the advent of electricity, if you were beyond a bike ride's distance, like man, that was a very different thing to try to facilitate unless both sets of parents really like wanted to work for benefit of that relationship. And I think that like I haven't been in that place yet with Liam. He's got a couple of like good little buddies, and we do do play dates and go to the movies, and like we coordinate things with their parents. And I would imagine we would do the same thing if they went to different schools, but I don't know that because we haven't been put there yet. But
Yeah.
I do know that I was exposed to a decent bit of moving early on. And then in the military, that's a lot of generally more significant bonding, but then found that those relationships were just as easy to detach from. The similar way that I think a lot of people, as they transition out of high school or whatever into their college or university studies, there's like initially, oh, we'll be friends forever, and then like, probably not the case.
Yeah.
And a lot of people at university or college, similar thing. Me, military, same thing. And so I guess I have been able to appreciate the more finite nature of relationships being an okay thing. I don't have, this is a good insight for me to think on. I don't have any long-term relationships that I have maintained whatsoever that haven't been far easier in a maintenance stage. Kind of what you were speaking to is like the type of people that you can just talk to after not talking for a year and you guys are good to go.
Yeah.
That for sure has seemed to take care of itself. That's not a thing that I really thought about. And maybe because it's been easy for me to accept a more finite or terminal relationship for a lot of relationships themselves. I know really early on, my first boss, Joe Mancari, Southside Deli, the little guy from Buffalo, New York, one day was like, Chucky, look down at your hand. You see those 5 fingers? That's how many real friends you'll have in your life. And being in middle school, maybe I was early high school, I was 14. So wherever you're at 14, I was like, that seems strange. Like, I know how many friends I have now. I don't assume that many of them will die in the near future. So I would assume that I will continue to accumulate and grow friends as I move through time. And that really has been, I guess, the case that like I have grown my number of friendships. But man, the people that I unquestionably know, it's easy for me to figure out who I would take a bullet for. That's not a hard one for me, but to think about who might take a bullet for me or for like Vanessa or Liam, that's a very different list.
Yeah, it's a very different conversation then, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, I struggled a lot with, I think I may have even said it to you guys on coaching calls. Like, I feel like I polarize people a lot. People either really like me or they really don't. And when they really don't, they really don't. And they can turn from one to the other like really fast. It's just something I've experienced. So I had a lot of trouble navigating that space, right up until, today years old. It's still a thing that you try and work through and go, okay, where is this relationship at, and evaluating it for what it is, not giving it too much of, what it's not, or me reading too much into it, and trying to be okay that some friendships just change and evolve over time, and
Yeah, I think
it's
that's
just the
something
nature
that
of the beast.
I have taken a lot of, it's made life a lot easier to have some lower expectations for a lot of relationships, and not necessarily in a bad way.
Mm,
Just to realize that, most people will act in their own interest most of the time,
mm,
more often than not.
yep.
And that truth exists also, that you yourself are not owed anything from anyone.
Mm,
And that is also juxtaposed with the fact that I genuinely believe it is better to give than receive. And so if you can navigate the relationships that you have in life, maybe more of them we get to look at as friendships, but I'm okay with not needing a whole lot of reciprocity on my side, because for me to pay into the system to make the world a better place, if I can connect some people, or if I can make a recommendation, or if I can put somebody in a position where better things may happen as a consequence of it, and expect nothing else in return besides being a part of that, that is a very cool place to be in. And I think that most people that do know me in a more intimate sense, or that I've even connected with, and probably not a super intimate sense, I think that a lot of people would say that of me, about me, and with me, that I genuinely try to go out of my way to be helpful.
mm.
Um,
I would definitely say that.
and I like doing that. And I think that that is a better framework to approach maybe gathering and growing friendships as you move through life, is just extend goodwill, be a go-giver, lend a helping hand, try to connect people, places, things, try to make, life in the world better. And the right people will come back to you on the back end for reciprocity in some form or fashion. Ideally, the ideal that I think we would look for is that, and this is, I'm thinking about this as I speak it out loud. I think what we hope for and what we want for is that they extend that reciprocity to us without us asking for it, or making any type of ask or call to action or request.
Yep. It's just,
But I don't know how often that is advisable or recommended, because how often do you sit around and just fucking wonder, thinking thoughts up in your bubble head, just I wonder who I could reach out to today to ask if I could help. And now I will do that time to time. I have zero expectation that most people navigate their life just stop and be who could I be helpful for? Who do I know that might be a good opportunity for? Who has a thing I could give them a little bit of belief, a little bit of hope, a little bit of support.
yep.
And so yeah, that's just a cool thing to do. And
Yeah, that's a great way
maybe
of,
there is a greater necessity to allow people to participate in that reciprocity by having to actually make some asks and set some expectations. But I don't think that comes to mind for me, because I don't really begrudge resentment for any of that. I don't feel as though I've extended some excess reciprocity imbalance.
well,
But that does manifest in the messiness, the stickiness of business and professional relationships, because then you do have the objectification of things that are tied into the relationship, and that's hard. But that's, I guess, a little bit different. Anyway.
and it's a bit like, there are people who keep score and go, oh, well, you did this for me, I need to do something for you. It's like, I've never been a person who has kept score. If I'm going to do something for you, I'm just going to do it because I choose to and I want to, and I know it's going to help you and whatever. But I'm not sitting there going, okay, well, I did this for Chuck yesterday, I'll just store that away as that's someone I can ask to do something for me. It's like, if it happens, it happens, but there's no no scoreboard, no tally of who's done more for who. It's just being a good human. And speaking in fitness terms, if we go back to one of my favorite quotes from Greg Glassman, do the right things, for the right reasons, and for the right people. It's just being a good human and doing something because you have the capacity to help somebody out, whether you consider them a best friend or where they fit in your circles. It's still just being a good human and not necessarily then sitting there and making it transactional.
Yeah, and so maybe like some good things to think about, like friendships. Friendships are a necessary piece of a life well lived. It cannot just be business associates. It cannot just be familial or like deeper personal relationships. A lot of the lines do cross, but you do need to have some people that are just friends. And maybe that is also a requirement of having both similar and dissimilar interests, because humans have a need for both variety and uncertainty. And so it's good to have that. I would say that it is worth your time and energy to deliberately expand your relationships and your network. It is worth cultivating better groups of better humans that exist in your life that you have awareness of and who have awareness of you. You should have low expectations of what that means for you. It is better to lead with a helping hand. And maybe we all have some, I'm sure we do. I'm sure that we all have some subconscious psychological strategy that, we get to cash in those chips for good favor or fortune in the future. I don't know. I contend with, like, is there such thing as a truly altruistic act? I don't know, because I do get great pleasure and validation from trying to help other people. And so that ends up being a bit self-serving. But anyway, lower expectations, like be okay having an expectation of reciprocity if you're willing to ask for it and if you're willing to help facilitate it and if you have earned it.
Yeah.
But if you're just out there doing like Johnny random good favors and they happen to be good favors that nobody's asking for, you especially can't like tally box your side of needing a favor because nobody really came to you with an ask. You were just like spreading good fortune and cheer.
And if you're okay with the not having the reciprocity back, then it makes it a lot easier. And rather than if you are, like you said, Johnny, be good, and you're out there just doing good stuff for people, and then you get all butthurt when none of it's coming back to you necessarily. It's like, well, you can't do something for someone with an expectation that it's going to come back to you, because that will just, mess you up completely and just lead to you being more conflicted over time, because not everybody is going to be like you.
Yeah. And that is an easier framework to approach life from. That if you have a desired expectation from a thing, it is only your fault if you don't clarify that expectation in advance of engaging in that thing, if there's any other possibility on the backside that you might not like what you get.
Yep.
So if you have an expectation of a situation going into it, that you're going to do a thing and then get a thing, or whatever the framing is, but nobody else knows it, then that's for sure entirely on you. That has nothing to do with the quality of the relationship. That is a life lesson, I think, for a lot of people to find out, or at least that's been big for me, is unclear expectations and things that I assumed would have some specific levels of reciprocity. And maybe this is speaking way more like the intersection of personal and professional relationships. But when there are undefined expectations for professional pieces of the context, that can create a lot of weight and baggage on the personal side. It's incredibly difficult to not find detriment in that, or at least that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, and I was just sitting there thinking of the Brene Brown quote, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So if you're, clear about your intentions or expectations or needs or wants or all of that sort of stuff, that's actually being kind to the other person and to yourself, rather than being very vague and then being, butthurt about something which it's not fair to the other person if you hadn't communicated that expectation. And then you're all, they're like, oh, why is Chuck like seems shitty with me lately, like whatever. And it's like, you have no idea that he had this, this expectation was there because it was never communicated. You're like, I didn't realize that that was a thing. So
yeah, and like, you will find that the relationships that are important to you, you have the ability to start addressing expectations. If you are not, far enough along, you don't catch it in advance, you're just fucked. Like that. I am no fully realized adult-sized human man. I do not flawlessly execute clear expectations for like anything ever.
Yeah.
Very messy. That's a hard thing for me. But it's okay in the relationships that you value and that value you will check you on expectations retroactively.
Yep.
They will at least, like, what I found is like the people that matter will let you know when you stepped out of an expectation, even if it's not a conversation that would necessarily need to happen. That's a thing that I have found with like some of the better relationships that I've had, and the more valuable ones. People will, they will let you know.
Yep. Because they care enough to go, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I thought was happening. It's because they care about the relationship to not see it, even if they don't realize it consciously, but to see it, turn into a shit show over something that's relatively, minor.
Yeah.
Or, let things get out of control.
Yeah, and that's also okay to willfully pursue. I know that's something that's been a wonderful area of growth and development for Vanessa and I in our relationship, is being very much so far more intentional and deliberate with our expectations, and also specifically just our words, like to choose to speak carefully.
Yep. That's
And
a big
also
thing.
to share better expectations and to make it an ongoing process.
And not take it for granted. So being quite intentional about that, and rather than just assuming, well, Vanessa and I are married, it's, I can just, you don't have to check in with that stuff. But you actually, if you're more intentional about it, it's way more rewarding both ways.
Well, I think something that we've come to at this stage in our lives is that our relationship presents a sandbox for exploring relationship skills and communication skills and relationship dynamics. And what better place to figure out expectations than the person that you share the most life with, but you also have the greatest leeway, or at least you should, in getting it right, getting it wrong, like iterating and improving. And so, that's something that her and I have like talked about as we go through this and as we work intentionally on growing as people and becoming better versions of ourselves, so that more than anything we can be good parents and continue to create like generational health and generational wealth and generational success and insight and wisdom, and just like pay it forward. Yeah, like you have to have somewhere that you can work on relationships.
Yeah, it's
I think
a skill.
a lot of people don't take advantage of those opportunities when they present earlier in life. And I think that this is I'm thinking about it as I'm saying it and kind of speaking out. I think there's a lot of people that miss some level of earlier life relationship skill development that they make it into adult life, and the act of identifying humans that would be, worth seeking some type of relationship with, or even knowing how to navigate, like, yeah, no, we like being around each other, but like, I don't know what to fucking do with this.
Yeah. But
Or I don't know how to make it better. I don't know how to do more of it. I don't know how to make it deeper. I don't know how to, like, okay, cool, we're fucking super happy in each other's company, but I don't really know how to progress beyond like weather in the game. So having just like, dude, figure out a place that you can test relationship stuff. And I think that most people, if they were willing to engage a little bit more purposefully, could also let you know that, like, hey, I am also working on relationship shit, and be like, so I struggle with clear expectations. So if it seems like I'm fucking weird as I outline our desire to next week on Wednesday at 7:30, where you're gonna text me 30 minutes before and we're gonna meet there, like, at this time, like, if it seems fucking weird, just know that, like, I'm trying to figure this out. And I think that most people be like, actually, you know what? Like, you probably seem like a good friend for me. And I think that you could be like, hey, I'm working on being more comfortable talking about, shit that like really matters to me, and less surface level conversations. So if I'm going way deeper with anything in our exchange than you would like, just like fucking feel free to high five and be like, actually, score the game and weather, great topics. What we're into right now, not where I'm at. Like, that's okay. Just let me know. So I think that, most relationships, if they were worthwhile, you could create the opportunity to explore conversation shit. But that is one thing that Vanessa and I have found really, really helpful, is to have, our marriage as this really standalone, super solid relationship where we can figure out how humans work better on connecting and communicating.
And it's like anything. It's whether it, we talk about it again, if we relate it back to fitness, snatching and burpees, it's a skill to be practiced. But I think we assume, well, a lot of people can assume, and like I said, I'm today years old when you figure out that, it is something that you have to be intentional about working on. And I've only come across that in probably the last, 18 months or so, in my relationships, where I've had to, be very intentional about that, and that it's okay to say, I'm not good at this, but I'm working on it. Can you, hold me on this and understand that and help me get better at that? Or just through awareness that someone goes, hey, that really wasn't cool. It's like, oh, I just thought, it was banter. It was, bit of shit talk. And it's like, no, that's not how these things are sometimes perceived. And it's like, oh, okay. But then being okay to have that hard conversation, and it's okay then, like, nothing changes. It's not like awkward next time we catch up. It's just, it's a thing. The boundaries are naturally discussed, but it's not a thing that, hangs over next time going, oh, well, I've got to remember Chuck's really sensitive about this. It's just, it's a skill.
Yeah, there's a lot of duality in, like, the simplicity and complexity of relationships. Like, the important people should be really easy to be around, but you might run into some more challenging pieces of relationships with those who are the easiest to be around, because it is often the simplest to get furthest away from shit. Because, like, I don't know.
It's
don't fight. maybe like, I don't know. Don't fight for a relationship to exist, but be willing to fight for the benefit of a relationship.
That's a good way to phrase it. Is
Well, Vanessa and I, we talk about this a lot because we are really actively engaged in trying to figure out a lot of our shit and to really figure out who the fuck are we and what do we really think about life and ourselves and the world, and holy shit, we've got a little human. And
Yeah.
he's going to have really difficult questions to ask us.
Mm.
And I know that very rarely in my childhood was I impressed with an answer that I got to a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
And I know that there is a lot of conversations that I wish had been better curated. And so we talk about a lot of this shit, and it's like the idea that, you know, relationships take work. Yep, totally agree. But for Vanessa and I, what we were talking about over the weekend is that, you know, the relationship existing isn't where the work should be. If you have to fight for the relationship to exist, you better just cut it off before it grows any bigger, spreads any further, gets any weirder.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, you know, a relationship can't require a tremendous amount of potentially really difficult work. Or at least that's kind of where we're at in our marriage. It is a good marriage. It is easy for us to be together, but we are working very deliberately uncomfortably on trying to figure out how to hold each other to higher standards, to communicate things more clearly with better language, to say more of what we really want and need and mean. And that shit is not easy, but for the good relationships that exist in your life, it will be worth it.
And that's, again, another skill. It's being able to have, you know, to get into the hard space and to be able to sit in that space with somebody else and have those conversations and knowing that it's, you know, mutually going to take you both forward, and it's rewarding. Like, you don't have to sit in that space all the time, but to know that you could with that person, and you, because you can reflect on times it's happened and where you are now, but it's, like, we can hang out, we can talk about the weather and the game, and like when we jumped on this call, so just chatting briefly about the weekend, I was talking about the dog and stuff, but then you know that you can go to those other places if you want to or need to, and it's a seamless change of gears versus, hey, can we have a talk kind of thing where you've got to preface it and preempt it and so that everyone's prepared for it. That's kind of like the hard, you know, the hard parts.
Yeah. And I don't know, definitely a thing that we often choose to make hard. And that is part of the skill, in and of itself.
Yeah, it's just, you know, we learn and we either learn and we evolve, or we just stay stuck in old patterns and behaviors. And you can see very clearly people who are in that state because, you know, their beliefs and their circle hasn't changed. Like, you see these, you know, 40, 50-year-old guys still hanging out with their bros from college, still, you know, drinking like they're 21 and running around, and they haven't evolved beyond that's all they have with those people. And it's all very surface level, and that serves them for whatever reason. Excuse me. But you just see that they haven't moved emotionally or, you know, intellectually forward.
That's okay too. And that's an important thing to realize is you need to be able to self-select.
Yes.
For yourself and others who is on a similar life trajectory as the one that you seek to be on, because all of your actions, all of your thoughts, and all of your words cast votes for who you choose to become in the future. And so, you know, if you've got a bunch of friends that are pushing the pedal on, you know, growth and development and business and shit faster and harder than you want to because you're in a place in life where you're like, dude, I'm just chilling right now. That's okay. You can, you know, you can do that, but, you know, also don't be the person that is wanting and seeking for somebody else to grow more than they want. And that is with any area, any shared interest. There's going to be people that want to be less involved in the fitness experience than maybe that was the commonality of where you guys met. You fucking both work out in the 4:30 class. you decide like you got the same shoes. It's like a middle school relationship kickoff. And you're like, we're in the same time with the same place, the same shoes. And like, we kind of like some of the same shit. And like a budding relationship was built. And like, you guys can find out that, you know, you're going different directions. And then like, maybe that's an okay thing to talk about, is like, hey, this direction that this part of our relationship is going in that we're no longer in alignment of, like, is this a thing that matters in the context of the overall relationship?
Or can we still hang out and be
um,
buddies for that hour? I had an interesting conversation with a friend once who moved to a different class in the gym, and they were like, my friendship account's full. Like, I can be nice to those people and interested in them in the hour that I'm there, but my close relationships that I have in this space is kind of at capacity, you know. And they very recognize that I'm coming into this new time, and I can, hey, Chuck, cool, you know, how's your dog, your kid, whatever. But then when they walk away, there's no further investment in that, and that's on both sides, and everyone's okay with that.
Yeah.
They both think that they're awesome people, but know that it doesn't need to be any more than that for everyone to be doing well in life.
Accumulate worthwhile relationships with good humans, but don't seek to make friendship exist for the sake of existing.
Yeah.
Unless you recognize that that is a detriment, or that is a hole in your own human experience, where you were like, you know what, I am lonely for friendship. And then maybe go and seek it, but seek it purposefully.
Yeah, don't just look for people to add.
Don't fill space with people for the sake of filling space. But like, I think it is okay to pursue like wanting friendship for the sake of friendship. And that's you know, that's probably kind of like where we can end at, is that's really where I'm at in my own life right now, is recognizing that for both Vanessa and I, we don't have very many friendship relationships, especially in closer proximity. And a lot of that's by design, and that's hard, and it's not intentional design. It's deliberate and intentional actions that create it as a secondary byproduct. Like, you know, people like us do things like this. Like, well, we both travel for work. That's when most people fucking hang out, is like on the weekend, when we often both travel for work. And then when we're together, like we like to be together. Not everybody's trying to have like couples friendships. A lot of people want to have time away from their partner or their spouse. So like, yeah, dude, we want more social friendships because we feel like that is negatively detrimental to our overall enjoyment of the human experience. Like we feel like we would be happier people if we had some more just like casual social friendships that didn't have business and personal intertwined. We didn't have like other expectations, or perhaps like sought reciprocity, because like that's just the nature of the relationship, right? Like Vanessa, as well as she might like, respect, admire, and like have good foundational pieces of a relationship with somebody that's like a pharmaceutical rep on one of the accounts that she's a part of, there's always going to be like an underlying current that like there's this other big fucking dynamic, and like in ways it's like gravity. Like it might not anchor us to it, but like it can shift our orbit, so to speak. And that's just a thing we contend with. So anyway, whatever, bullshit. We don't have a lot of friends, and we're trying to figure that out, but we've got a lot of relationships. And like, I don't know, not that we don't have a lot of friends. We don't have a lot of real world face-to-face social relationships. And that's a better clarifier. We both have an enormous number of like friendships, but not a lot of people I can go like drink coffee and beer with.
Yeah. And same as we were only talking about that here last week. It's like, we've got friends and we've got close friends, but who are we having lunch with or dinners with or whatever? We don't have that. It's like, oh, this just, you know, it feels like a weird space. And then it's like, well, I don't want to pursue it just so that we've got someone to have Friday night dinner with. It's got to be just organically, you know, evolving that's something that happens. So yeah, it's a funny space.
I say that like our next like potential social thing is like date night this week. I got an invite for there's like a higher level networking entrepreneur group. I met a guy actually in an airport. He was coming back from a conference that he had gone to attend. And I was coming back from like coaching a seminar, and we met and like got in contact. And so maybe the next social engagement that we have is going to be this fucking networking event, get together on like a rooftop bar in downtown Austin, which for sure isn't like exactly what I'm talking about needing, but like, I don't
No.
know, we're in a season of life where like there's a lot of difficult opportunity costs, and that's a lot of where going through this podcast is helpful for me to start thinking about some of these things, because the reality of just how finite time and energy and attention and life is. Fuck, do we pursue more higher level humans and more beneficial relationships in the sense of like pushing us further and faster? And oh, by the way, we might also find that like we become fast friends with these people. Or is it like stop and smell the roses, like hang out and enjoy like a little bit of what you've got while you have it, because none of us are promised tomorrow?
Yeah.
Both answers
Can be correct.
Can be correct, but man, they come at the expense of one another in some ways. Anyway,
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Well, no, and we don't know, and that's the beauty of A, these conversations, and B, not, and I know that the intent of these is to give Liam some, insights and perspective, not necessarily a how-to manual to adult, but
Well,
it's
like,
all
fuck,
to
dude,
navigate life.
it's interesting that you brought it up, and like I was today years old when somebody was like, "So, how do you think about friendship?" That seems kind of fucked up to me, that's not like a thing that we, like you wonder why so many people are anxious, depressed, lonely, mad, begrudging, shitty at communicating in relationships. Like, fuck, man, I don't even know how I think about relationships. And I was today years old when I stumbled across that. So maybe we'll do a follow-up on it.
Yeah, with 20 seconds notice, as I want to do. Well, thank you again for your time. Great chat.
Thank you for your time and your friendship. You are one of my friends.
And you are certainly one of mine in my circle, that's for sure. And I'm very grateful
in the
for
top
what we
8.
share.
We'll bring back space.
In the top 8. Nice. All right. Enjoy your day, and we will talk again real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to another conversation with Chuck Bennington. Hope it was enjoyable for you. Hope there was some value and some benefit in it. Maybe even had a laugh or two. Even though these are primarily for me and Liam, we sure love to help a friend in need, because it's a friend indeed. So if there was some piece of it that was good, please feel free to share it with somebody else and pay it forward. If you think what we're doing is rad and you want to support it, please just like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. Appreciate you, dudes.